at QuickBooks point of sale and doing purchasing and receiving. So we will start out with looking at purchasing. We'll look at how to create a purchase order. We will take a look at adding things out of inventory. We will look at how to add a new item to a purchase order that's not currently in our inventory. And we will look at how to edit and delete an item that we put on a purchase order and how we can delete a purchase order or edit a purchase order. We will then look at how to receive items. We will look at receiving items from a purchase order. We will look at how you can receive items in a voucher without a purchase order. We will look at how to adjust the voucher to add things like fees and freight, or how to adjust the voucher if you find out you made a mistake after you created it. And we'll look at how to add billing info so that if you're seeking with QuickBooks Accounting, it will go over to QuickBooks Accounting as a bill to be paid. I'm bringing up my QuickBooks point of sale here. On our QuickBooks point of sale, we're going to start out by going to purchase orders. We will go down to purchase orders. We will look at creating a purchase order. To do that, we will click on the purchase order button in the navigator. That will open up our purchase orders. Once we have our purchase orders opened, you'll notice there are two red asterisks in a purchase order. That means those two fields are required whenever you do a purchase order. That is a purchase order number and a vendor. So first thing I want to do is I want to select my vendor. And let's see. So I will select my vendor. I'll also want you to notice that over here in the upper right-hand corner, there are 3 dates. There is a order date. There is a ship date, the date you expect the vendor to ship it out, and a cancel date if that happens to apply. There's also the place for the associate. If you're having people log in and out of your point of sale, whoever is logged in will be recorded as the associate who created that purchase order. Purchase orders can have 4 different statuses. You can have an open purchase order. That's one that you have placed with your vendor. You can have a pending purchase order. That's one that you're still working on and haven't yet placed with the vendor. You can also have a closed purchase order, which is one that you've received everything on it and you no longer need it because you've received everything. You can also have a suggested purchase order. That would be one which was suggested based on your reorder points. So I'm going to start out by adding an item to this purchase order. I've got a couple of 3 choices. One, I can click into the enter items. I can enter an item number. I can scan an item. I can type in an item description. I can also click on the little pull down arrow and select an item from my list of items. I can click on find items. I could search for an item, or I can go to my item list. If I go to my item list, I can come over here and I can sort by vendor. I can locate my vendor. And once I locate my vendor, I can see the different items that I get from that vendor. I can see how many I currently have in stock, how many I have on order. In the yellow column here under doc quantity, I can tell it how many I would like to get. So I'm going to order 2 of those, 2 of those, 1 of those, 2 of those, 2 of those, 1 of those, 2 of those, 1 of those, 2 of those, 2 of those, 2 of those, and 2 of those. And I could continue right on down the list for whatever I wanted to add. I will then do a select, and that will add those items to my purchase order. It tells me how much each item costs, what the extended cost is of the items, and down here in the bottom right-hand corner, what my total for the purchase order is. I also, in the bottom left-hand corner, tells me how many different items I ordered, how many individual things I ordered, how many I've currently received, how much has not been filled, which is right now 100% unfilled, and I still have all 21 items due. I have a payment date. When does this vendor expect to get paid for this merchandise? And I can enter that payment date. And that will set up my terms. I could also do it by going to terms and enter the terms in the terms block. I also have a place down here for any special instructions that might apply to this particular purchase order. If you happen to have more than one store, up here at the top, you can select what address this is being shipped to and what address it is being billed to. The ship to and the bill to do not have to be the same address. By default, they are. But if you have more than one store, the ship to might be a different address if you're drop shipping it to one of your other stores. All right. I can save that, or I can save and print it. If I save and print it, it would look something like that. And we would get a purchase order similar to that. We could then mail it off to our vendor. We could fax it to the vendor, or we could email it to the vendor so that they have the complete list of exactly what we're ordering. Once you've completed that purchase order, you'll see it shows up in your list of purchase orders, and you see that we get this little circle with the number beside it. That tells us how many purchase orders we currently have pending that haven't been received. You can see here that I have, on these first two purchase orders, I have received part of that merchandise. I still have a few items that haven't been received. And so they're still pending out there. Based on the dates of those purchase orders, I would say I'm probably never going to get those, and it would probably be safe to delete them because those are probably never going to show up as back orders. I can also, in a purchase order, if I have brand new merchandise that I've never carried before, I can add that merchandise to a purchase order. So if we choose our vendor, and I want to come down here and I want to create a new item, I can click on the pull down and choose new items from the top of that list. Or again, I can go to find items and come down here to add new item. That will take me to the add new items. You'll notice, if you're familiar with the add new item screen in the item list, this one looks a little bit different. It essentially has the same stuff, but it does look a little bit different because things are, the same things are here, they're just in a different order. We start out with what department is this going to be in? And so this is going to be in my t-shirts department. This part I don't understand because I just told it what the vendor was. So why didn't it bring that over? I don't know. And so we get the vendor name. We add our item name. And so we get our item name. We can expand in the item description if we want to add more details than simply the item name. We can add attributes and size if they apply. In this case, I'm going to add an attribute of white, and I'm going to add an attribute of small, a size of small. I'm not going to put any quantity because I don't have any at the moment. I'm not going to put a UPC because this item is going to classify as a style. And with the style, each item has to have a unique UPC. And so I will worry about adding UPCs, if I'm going to add them at all, after the merchandise actually arrives. I can do an alternate lookup if I have one that applies. An alternate lookup is similar to a UPC in that each item must have a unique alternate lookup. The big difference between an alternate lookup and a UPC is an alternate lookup can also include letters, not just numbers, as part of that lookup number. We're going to have the regular price. What are we going to sell these for? And what is our order cost? And so we enter our order cost. We enter our regular price. I do not need to put an average cost. I've never carried these before. I'm going to receive them all off of a receiving voucher. Therefore, the receiving voucher will then calculate what my average unit cost is. If I needed to, I could go over and add any additional information that applied. I could apply any custom fields that may exist. I could look at history, but I don't have any because I haven't done anything with this item yet. I will do a edit, add style. Yes, I will save my changes. And I am going to add a couple of other sizes. So we've got a couple of other sizes. I'm also going to add a couple of other colors. So we've got a couple of other colors. Next, I need to populate in my grid how many of each item I intend to order. So I want 2 of those, 3 of those, 3 of those, 2 of those, and 2 of those. 2, 3, 3, 2, and 2. You'll notice that I am going across the grid because I want to group my items together by size and by color. Therefore, by entering them in this order, they're going to be added to my item list in the order that I enter them in the grid. So I enter my items, I do a save and select, and it will add all those items to my purchase order. That is one of the big advantages of adding items when you're doing new items in a purchase order, as opposed to adding them directly in a receiving voucher. In a receiving voucher, you are not able to create a style. You can only add items individually in a receiving voucher. So I will save that, and I now have another purchase order available. All right. So once we have ordered the items that we need to order, we've made our purchasing. If I find that I need to, I can also go back in. I can pick on a purchase order. I can edit it. And in the edit, I can change and adjust something before I actually place that order. If I realize that, whoops, they're charging me extra on these extra larges, I could go in and I could change the cost on these extra large items. Before I actually receive that purchase order. I can save that. When I'm actually ready to receive that purchase order, I can select the one I want to receive. I can go up here to I want to and receive items, or I can click the collapse button. That allows me to see what is on my purchase order. I can then go up here to receive items. I can choose receive items. I can then, if I choose, go through this list in the dot quantity and say how many of each color and each size I got. Or what I find easier, I can do a select all and a continue. That will add those items directly to a receiving voucher. Once I have them in a receiving voucher, I can then go through and edit the quantities or the cost if I need to. You'll notice that on the extra larges, it brought over the new cost that I entered in the purchase order. If I desire, at this point, I can also come over here and I can tell it I want to print tags. When I'm printing tags, I would choose to print all, document quantity, and then when I tell it to print tags, it is going to print one tag for each item that I have on my purchase order. So I got 2 smalls, I got 3 mediums, I got 3 larges, 2 extra larges, and 2 double extra larges, and then to the blacks and so on through the list. And so I will get one tag for each item. If I happen to have my receiving voucher from the vendor, I can also go over here to billing info and I can enter my vendor invoice number. I can enter the date for the billing of this merchandise, and I can enter when this merchandise expects to be paid. I can save that. If there was any freight on this, I can also go to discount fees and freight, and I could add the freight charge for the merchandise. If you choose, you can also spread that freight, and that will divide the freight cost among the items according to the price of the item or the cost of the item and the number of items you have at each cost. So if you notice the prices over there, we have $7.50 and $8. If I spread it, those costs all change. So it spreads that over the cost of the items. If I haven't sent it to QuickBooks, I can change my mind and unspread it, and then my freight will show up separately. I can save that and print it. And my printed voucher would look like that. And because I added the invoice number and invoice date to it, next time I was to do a sync or update QuickBooks, it would send that over to my QuickBooks accounting, and it would show up over there as a bill to be paid. Once you have received that voucher, it will then show up in your receiving history, and you can also review it, what you received, and when you received it, and when your bills due. You could also, from this point, select one of the items and print tags if you didn't print them while you were still in the open voucher. If you find that you need to make a change to this voucher for some reason, there's only 2 changes you can make at this point. That would be, you could add, and I'm going to add a couple more buttons over here. You could add your invoice and invoice date, or your billing info. You can also adjust your freight. And those are the only 2 things you can actually change. If one of your quantities was wrong, or one of your costs was wrong, you cannot change it directly in this voucher. To do that, you would need to copy the voucher, and on the copy, then you could change something if you needed to. You could change quantity, You could change cost. You could even add items or take items away. You can completely remove an item from it if you found that you needed to after you'd already saved it. I don't need to change this, so I'm not going to actually make that change. All right. And if we come over here, you can see that that voucher is no longer on my voucher list, on my purchase order list rather, because I've already received it. If I wanted to receive this one, I could select it. And again, I could go to receive items. I can select all, and I can continue. And it drops them all in just like before. Again, I can adjust my billing info and freight. If I don't have them, I can save those for later. Again, I could select any item over here, and I could print the tags, and I could print my tags for this order. Notice I only got one tag because I did not tell it to select all and do document quantity. And I get them all. If I think everything is right, and I save it, and then again I realize that I didn't get one of those items. Because after I printed my tags and went to stick them on all my items, I found out I got a couple of tags left over. Therefore, the item wasn't there to tag. So over here in my receiving history, I can reselect that voucher. I can copy it. I realize I did not get that one. I can remove it from the voucher, save that change, and now I have two copies of that voucher, the original one and the changed one. I need to get rid of this one, otherwise I've received double the merchandise that I should have. So I select the original one that I copied and I reverse it, and that will then remove that voucher and all the merchandise in it. It says I can put everything back in my purchase order. No, I don't want to do that. If I had a invoice number and invoice date listed on this voucher, it would then add a credit to my pay bills for that vendor. But since it didn't have any billing information on it, it just cleared that out. And so instead of saying needs billing info like this one does, it says absolutely nothing, and that will never go over to your QuickBooks accounting. This one won't go over until you actually add that invoice number and invoice date to it. Before that one will go over to accounting. This one is waiting to go over next time we do an update QuickBooks. Because I took one of the items off of that voucher, I would expect it to show back up here in my purchase orders. But since I told it don't update my purchase orders, it did not show up. All right. Anybody have any questions so far? All right. I don't hear any. I don't see any hands raised. All right. And let's see here. So we took a look at creating an item, creating a purchase order. both from inventory and by adding new items. We looked at how we could edit a purchase order. We haven't deleted one yet. To delete one, I can go to my purchase orders, and you don't see it because when there's a closed purchase order, it doesn't show up under open purchase orders. But if I go to all purchase orders, I should see my closed purchase orders. I could then select that purchase order, and I could delete it. Because once I've received it, I no longer need the closed purchase orders. I also have a couple of suggested purchase orders here, which have never been finished and sent to the vendor. I can see by the dates on them that they're pretty old. So I can also get rid of those because apparently I don't intend to order those. So I can delete those also. And that just leaves me with my open purchase orders. And that's all I have left. And that is what you do to keep a clean purchase order file. Because if you just let those deleted or closed purchase orders pile up on you, they add to the size of your backup files. And your backup files just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you really don't need them all getting bigger. And we had one question, is can you scan items to receive them? Yes, you can scan them, but the item does have to already exist in your item list, which it should if it's on a receiving voucher. And there's really, unless you're creating them directly into a receiving voucher, it really doesn't do much good to scan them. And if it doesn't have a barcode on it that the system recognizes, such as a UPC that's already been programmed into the item list, or one of your own price tags on it, then it's not going to recognize the item if you try to scan it. So it won't do any good to scan it if that happens to be the case. And as I mentioned, in a voucher, the disadvantage of adding new items to a voucher is you'll notice that the style button's grayed out. If the item you're trying to add is a onesie item, no problem at all. If it doesn't come in different sizes and attributes, then you, by all means, you can add it directly into a receiving voucher. And it looks just like it does when you add it in the item list. But if it's something that comes in different sizes and attributes, you can't do a style. So I would highly recommend doing it in a purchase order rather than directly into a receiving voucher. Okay.
We're sold out.
Any other questions? No? All right. If nobody has any other questions, then that's about all I've got for you today. I hope you got a little bit more information about how to create a purchase order, how to add items to a purchase order, how you can select items from your existing inventory list, and how you can convert those purchase orders into a receiving voucher to receive those items. So, hope everyone had a good one. This information will go up on our webpage with this recorded webinar, so you'll be able to go back and see the information there. So, everybody have a great one, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.